So for this research project, we chose the implementation of a self-monitoring application to improve on-task behavior for our study. So self-monitoring is defined as a multiple-step process where the student observes the occurrence or non-occurrence of the behavior and records features of the observed behavior. So in this study, they aim to use relevant and more motivated methods for self-monitoring in high school age students with ADHD, which included tablets and mobile devices for their self-monitoring. The purpose of the study was to examine the effects of technological-based self-monitoring interventions on the on-task and disruptive behaviors for 2 students with disabilities. And their research questions included: what is the effect of the intervention on primary dependent variables of students' on-task behavior? What is the effect of the intervention on generalization variable of disruptive behavior? Can the intervention be implemented with high fidelity? And what is the treatment acceptability of the intervention as reported by the students and their teacher? So the methods for the original study: the dependent variable was the percentage of time on task for each 15-minute observation period. The participants used the iConnect application on tablets, which provided prompts asking whether they were on task or not every 5 minutes. Disruptive behavior was recorded using frequency during the observation interval, and an ABAB withdrawal design was used. So for the results of this study, the functional relationship between the introduction of the intervention and the change in the student's on-task behavior was looked at. The level of implementation on the intervention as reported by the students and their teacher, the social validity of the intervention as reported by the students and their teacher. And for their results, they showed improvements in on-task behavior. This was per student and teacher report in that science class that they were looking at. And then the intervention was rated positively by classroom teachers. So as far as limitations for the study, they are unsure if results generalized to other classes rather than just science class, which was the class that they were using like the iConnect app in. There was also no programming for fading the intervention. Their interval length was not varied during the study, so it stayed at that 15 minutes the whole time. No academic data was collected to measure achievement outcomes. So even if they were on task, the study did not include what their grades looked like or what the assignment completion was. And also only 2 students were included in the study. For future research, additional students should be used, more than 2. And then it should also investigate literature gaps in self-monitoring and secondary school-based research. Should investigate generalization to non-intervention classes. So if it would generalize further than just that science class that they were looking at. And should incorporate achievement measures within the intervention design with proximal and distal components.
For our literature review, we found a lot of articles in peer-reviewed journals to support our research and the data methods that we collected for our self-monitoring behavior. Self-monitoring is a promising evidence-based intervention for students who benefit from supplemental supports to stay on task during academic periods. Implementation of a self-monitoring application to improve on-task behavior was a study conducted that a self-monitoring intervention resulted in clear improvements in on-task behavior and improvement in their academic efforts by using the iConnect app. And that is what we used for our intervention. And iConnect was found to demonstrate strong functional relations, an abrupt increase in on-task behavior, and consistently provide positive parametric effects across all participants.
Hi guys, so I'm going to explain the purpose of the replication study. So we put down three. The first one is that for the purpose of our replication studies for the group, to self-monitor our own behavior throughout the study to conclude if our on-task behavior did increase. So what this means is that throughout the study, each of us took our own data, we took our own videos, and for those IOA sessions. And throughout the study, while we were taking data, we went in and out of the withdrawal and intervention phases. And at the end, we wanted to conclude if during those intervention phases, when we were self-monitoring throughout this study, if our on-task behavior did increase. The second purpose is to evaluate the effects of using technology based on self-monitoring for tracking on-task behavior. So what this means is that in those phases where we were using the technology to self-monitor, so getting those updates, are we on task? We wanted to see if that did in fact help us stay on task for our on-task behavior. And our third one is to evaluate if IOA percentage is similar and is at or above 80% during the IOA sessions. So during those IOA sessions, we would watch our partner's video, our partner would watch our video, and we would calculate the time that we were on task and compare it to what our partner had. So during those sessions, we of course want to have our IOA percentages very similar and of course above or at 80% to show that our calculations and our operational definition and everything was the same.
Hi, I am going to be going over the beginning of the methods section for our replication study. The participants in our study included 6 graduate students, all females, ages 23 to 25. We are all currently living in the Central Time Zone, and all participants work either full-time or part-time jobs. The setting of our study took place in each participant's home, and data was taken in a selected studying spot within the home. The materials of the study included an iPhone with a timer or the iConnect app, laptop or computer with internet access, individual study materials, and access to Google Drive and Microsoft platforms. All right, now I will be going over the second slide in our methods section. Our behavior that we took data on was on-task behavior, and we defined this as engaging with the task on hand by orienting the body and eyes toward the work materials. Examples include typing or reading material on a laptop, writing notes in a notebook, or reading a book required for class. Non-examples include looking through social media while working on your laptop, talking on the phone while working, looking through non-school related material, and anytime you get up out of your seat. For our data collection, we took data 3 times per week during 15-minute recording sessions. The sessions were separated into 5-minute intervals, and data was collected by watching the recorded sessions and determining the on-task behavior by taking the total seconds spent on task and dividing it by 900 seconds or the 15-minute interval.
For our replication study, we followed the original study's design in using an A-B withdrawal design to be able to analyze the effects of the iConnect self-monitoring application. The phases included a baseline, the iConnect self-monitoring intervention, withdrawal, and return to intervention. Each session was 15 minutes in length and a minimum of at least 5 data points per collection phase was taken. But more sessions may have been added if there was variability in the data that was collected. Since we collected and analyzed our own on-task behavior, we made sure to record each session. That way each individual could watch the video recording and then using a stopwatch collect their own on-task behavior duration. So moving into the replication study methods, baseline, and treatment phases. To start, each participant took at least those 5 data points of baseline data. During baseline, the subjects were to record themselves for 15 minutes while doing some sort of assigned task. whether that was homework, studying, taking a quiz, writing a paper, reading an article, working on a presentation, whatever that may have been. The percent of on-task behavior was then calculated using duration of on-task behavior divided by 15 minutes or 900 seconds multiplied by 100. The next phase was the iConnect self-monitoring intervention. During this phase, each participant had to download the iConnect app on their devices and set up an account. Then they were to adjust the settings in the account to have 3 5-minute intervals, where after each interval, the iConnect application either flashed, chimed, or vibrated, letting the individual know they had to answer the question, "Are you on task?" and click yes or no. Once the participant answered the question, they continued to work until the 15 minutes were up. Using another device, each session was also recorded, just like in baseline, and the individuals took their own duration of on-task behavior using a stopwatch and again calculated the percent of on-task behavior. After a minimum of 5 sessions for the intervention, participants moved on to the withdrawal phase, which, just as with the baseline phase, they recorded themselves for 15 minutes and collected the percent of on-task behavior for another at least 5 sessions. Finally, the last phase was the return to intervention, where participants were to again use the iConnect app and collect the percent of on-task behavior there as well. After 15 minutes, the participants were to watch their recording and collect the amount of time that they were on task using a stopwatch. Then, of course, the percent of on-task behavior per session was calculated using the duration of on-task behavior in seconds divided by 900 seconds and multiplied by 100. That calculation was used for each of the phases to find that percentage, which was then later graphed. In order to find IOA, we used total duration IOA because the duration of on-task behavior was collected during the experiment. We used at least 30% of intervention trials for the inter-observer agreement. What that meant was most of our participants had at least 3 IOA data points. The participants were to have someone watch their intervention recordings and collect the duration of on-task behavior as IOA. The equation for total duration IOA was used, which is found by taking the shorter duration divided by the longer duration and multiplied by 100. Because each session was recorded and the participants did not share their personal data with their IOA partners, treatment integrity remained in check. Most of the individuals in the study had a high IOA. However, some differences in IOA could have been due to using a different stopwatch, not being properly trained on how to take the duration data, or finding it confusing, the behavior duration definition being unclear to the IOA partner, or taking inaccurate data. As you can see here, these are my results from the intervention. The baseline mean was 28%. The baseline range was 19 to 40%. The intervention mean was 78%. The intervention range was 67 to 93%. The withdrawal mean was 33%, and the withdrawal range was 27 to 42%. Then the return to intervention mean was 88%, and the return to intervention range was 75 to 95%. So as the graph shows, there is a functional relationship because there is an increasing trend during the intervention phases, as well as a higher level in percent of on-task behavior during intervention versus the baseline and withdrawal phase. Analyzing the graph further, you can see here that when the iConnect app was removed during the withdrawal phase, the percent of on-task behavior significantly decreased in level. There was no significant trend found in baseline or withdrawal, but you can see that due to the increasing trend, there was in fact a functional relationship. A large reason for why this study had proven to increase my on task behavior is that I found my phone extremely distracting during the baseline and withdrawal phases, while in the intervention phases, because the iConnect app was being used and I could not have access to any distractions on my phone due to the iConnect app, my on-task behavior significantly increased.
So for my results for this study, my baseline range was from 36 to 58%. My baseline mean was 79%. The intervention range was 52 to 82. My first intervention mean was 70%. My return to baseline range was 39 to 59. My return to baseline mean was 48. My return to intervention range was 63 to 81. And my return to intervention mean was 72. So looking at my data for this study, I would not conclude a functional relationship due to the overlapping of some of the data points within like baseline and intervention. In order to have a functional relationship, I would probably have to continue the study a little longer just to see if those levels kind of stabilize. Yeah.
So my results have shown an increasing trend in the return to baseline phase, which shows a functional relationship between my baseline and introduction and return to baseline phases. My range in the baseline were 26 to 61%. My baseline mean was about 44%, and the intervention range was 43 to 81%. My intervention mean was 70%, and when we had the removal of the intervention or return to baseline phase, my percentages were back to 32 to 60%, and then my mean was 46%, which was very similar to my first baseline phase results. In my return to intervention range, I had 55 to 89% with a 73% mean, which was very close to my first intervention range and mean, which shows a clear functional relationship that when we use the intervention, or when I use the intervention, I had an increase of on-task behavior during my intervals, and when we had to remove the intervention or return to baseline phase, my results and my percentages were lower once again.
Okay, so here we have the results for my on-task behavior. Baseline range was 34 to 60%, baseline mean was 45%, intervention range was 40 to 74%, intervention mean was 69%, return to baseline range was 25 to 89%, return to baseline mean was 60%, and return to intervention range was 56 to 92%, and return to intervention was 89%. As you can see here, there is no significant trend from baseline to the intervention and baseline or the withdrawal to intervention. When having the iConnect app being displayed in the second intervention implementation, there is an increase on task behavior. There is a lower rate of being on task in the baseline phases, with the baseline mean being 45% and the intervention mean being 69%. That is an increase. There displays a functional relationship due to the distinct behavior change in the introduction and removal of the intervention phase.
I am now going to go over my results for our study. My baseline range was between 48 and 15.4%, and my baseline mean was 50.6%. My first intervention range was 62 to 71%, and that intervention mean was 68.6%. Our return to baseline or withdrawal phase my range was 59 to 63%, and the mean for that phase was 60.5. Our return to intervention phase range was 79 to 83, and the mean was an 80.3%. I would not conclude a functional relationship within my data. I think that I would have to continue on with the intervention, which would take more time because between my intervention and withdrawal phase, there are some overlapping data points, as well as not much change in the level within my data. To conclude a functional relationship, I would like to keep this experiment going with more data points and a continued baseline and intervention phase.
So I'm going to be talking about my results. So the results of Cheyenne. The baseline, the average of the baseline is 48%. The range is 37 to 69%. For the first intervention phase, the average is 81, so that's definitely an increase from my baseline average, that was 48%. The range of the intervention is 71 to 89%. For the first withdrawal, the average is 55%. The range is 45 to 66%. Back to the second intervention, the average is 80%. The range is 74 to 86%. And for the final withdrawal phase, the average is 33% and the range is 25 to 42%. So we can definitely see that functional relationship with the averages and the ranges, where in the withdrawal and baseline, they're all significantly lower, as in the intervention phases, they're all pretty high.
So now going over the conclusions and overall results of our replication study. Each participant was able to use the iConnect app appropriately throughout our study on our smartphones and used an iPhone timer during the baseline and return to baseline phases. While the participants varied on the days they took data and the type of work we were doing, our intervals were staying the same throughout the study and throughout all participants. Each of our results demonstrated a functional relationship between phases, while some had a higher increasing trend throughout each phase. They depicted a functional relationship between them. This concluded, and with all the graphs that are inserted within this PowerPoint, the results concluded that the iConnect app self-monitoring application affected on-task behaviors between participants while showing an increasing percentage of staying on task between the intervals. This is compared to the baseline and return to baseline phases when we just used an iPhone timer with no app and no check-ins. Now I'll be talking about the limitations of our study. The first one would be how our intervals were shortened for the purpose of the project and the timeliness of everyone within the study. If we had our intervals longer, our IOA purposes would have been a little bit more difficult to rewatch, and our own videos and our partners' videos to match up with IOA. So we shortened it to 15 minutes per session instead of an extensive 30 or 45 minutes for the intervals. And then for the days that the data was taken, it differed between participants. So I could have done it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a different participant could have taken it Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And depending on the workload that each participant had, one could have had more stress a certain day or might have had weekend plans, so there might have been more of a distraction or more of a clouded mind during these intervals. The no tangible reward within the project could also have been a limitation. There was no reward after completing the check-ins and the timers and the data collection. So if there was no reward, there may have been much less motivation to have within the study. Also, there was no guideline on what type of work we could have been doing. It could have been a simple project, or it could have been a really hard task that I didn't know how to do. So having a difficult task could have made me more procrastinating, or could have lessened my motivation to complete the work, versus a easier, more familiar task that could have been done pretty easily and quickly. So these are just a few of the limitations within our project.